Author Nation, welcome to another episode of the podcast. We're happy to have you here. You're going to be happy you're here because Joe is sitting down with some old dogs with no tricks this episode. Special guests John Logsdon and AG Riddle are here to talk about the path their careers took, and you're going to be able to learn a lot from them in this conversation, so stay tuned.
All right, we are back in Durham with another episode. This one we're calling Old Dogs with No Tricks.
All right.
Aptly named.
Yeah, I know. It was one of the easiest named episodes ever.
Yeah. And it was nice talking to you all.
Stuff writes itself.
Yeah. See, who's the best writer at this table?
Nobody answers.
So we have John Logsdon and we have AG Riddle here today. And we just off mic figured out you both started or both published the same year.
Mm-hmm. Almost
within a month of each other.
Yeah. Wow. So why don't you guys do a little intro, and then we're going to dig in and talk about what it was like then, what it's like now, and all the scar tissue in between.
Well, sure. I started an internet company in college and did that for 10 years. And then I would characterize my internet career as middling at best. I mean, it was okay. And I'd made enough money to take some time off to try to figure out what I should be doing with my life. And what I really loved is reading and science fiction. And this was 2011, and this was going on. And I was reading self-published science fiction novels. And I was like, wow, they're great books and it's something I love. And I really think that being a software developer to some degree lends itself to writing, because I mean, you're used to just sitting in a room and creating something just by yourself. And publishing is something I knew nothing about. So but I knew a lot about selling things on the internet. So the idea of writing a book, putting it on the internet and seeing what happened appealed to me greatly. And so, 2.5 years later, I've published my first book. So, it took a hot second. And my wife was like, man, this feels like that Russell Crowe movie where he's like losing his mind. And this is not.
Which one?
Yeah. It turned out to be Gladiator. And once I published it and the reviews started coming out. So anyway, I published my first book in March of 2013 and have published 13 since, and collected a great deal of one-star reviews.
Nice.
Thousands and thousands.
Similar story, actually, except for I'm not successful. No. For me, it was I grew up reading tons of science fiction, just loved it to death. And then I was a programmer. I started on a Commodore VIC-20. And moved on to the Commodore 64. And now I'm really dating myself. But anyway, and from there, I just started, I was actually an entrepreneur early on. And next thing you know, I started working for other companies and doing all that stuff. And I happened to meet another guy, his name is Chris Young. And he and I, we met at martial arts, actually. And we just both had a big love for science fiction and so on. So we started... I think it was Gotham Writing Workshop was in 2000. And I had already written a couple of game programming books, and those were published in the UK. And then, so we went to this class, and I tried to write seriously. And I'd always tried younger to write seriously, but I would get like 4 or 5 chapters in, and my now wife, yes, we've been together that long. Anyway, I'm not going to tell you what those things what happened in those books. Let's just say they got pretty irreverent pretty fast. But she would be reading 3 chapters in, and the start of the next chapter, she would just start busting out laughing. She's like, you just can't do this, because I could not maintain serious for very long. So I went to that writing class in Gotham and tried again. And no, I just kept on writing comedy. And finally, the teacher actually just said, dude, just write comedy. And I was like, you mean that's okay? I was like, okay. And so I did. And next thing you know, I wrote the first book of my Ononican series. And it probably took about 2 years to write that. And then I made a huge mistake, and I sent it to, I think it's called the editorial department. And they ripped it to shreds. And it hit really hard. I didn't expect that, and it actually took a couple of years before I was like brave enough to try again. And then I realized one day, screw them, because this is what I want to write. And they were telling me, no, this has to be serious. That has to be serious. And I didn't want it to be serious. So I did that. And then we had written a second book. And then I finally got brave enough to just say, I'm going to push this out. And it was 1 month before you had pushed yours. And sales were slow. It was, I had no idea what I was doing, just like what you were saying, just completely lost about what to do. And so I just kept on writing and got faster at writing and just fell in love with it completely. And next thing you know, a career was built out of that. And pretty soon I was able to leave my full-time job and was doing that. Plus, of course, working on the Author Helper Suite stuff. And I've been doing it ever since. That's it.
Cool. So I know you've probably heard it from other folks, but like a lot of people say, oh man, it used to be so much easier back then. Was it?
Yes. Yeah, it was.
All right. We'll see you guys next week.
Well, no, I mean, think about it though. You could give away a book. There was a time where I was running an ad on Facebook for the first book in my Ononokan series, and it was free. And I was spending, so the thing was that I was going to try to grow my newsletter. Okay. At that time, this is what, 2015-ish is, I'm thinking 14, 15. And I'm trying to grow my newsletter. So I'm doing this Facebook ad thing. And I had like 25 people on my newsletter, most of them me, under different emails, testing, my mom, that kind of thing. And the next day, I had like 4 more. The next day, I had 10 more than that. Then it just started growing really fast to the point where I said, well, I'm just going to spend $100 a day on this thing. And I was getting 400 signups a day. Wow. For this. And on top of that, I did a What You Want Fries With That page, which basically is when a person signs up to the newsletter, they're taken to something that says, hey, in about 5 to 15 minutes, you're going to get the book that I promised you. While you're waiting, you can get the whole series for only, $9.99 or whatever it was, right? And I got to the point where I was making lots more money to have people sign up to my newsletter than anything else. So yes, back in the day, it was much easier.
How about you, man? What was it like? Initial marketing thing that was like, holy cow, this thing is.
Well, I think it was easier on a few levels. I mean, the business was less complicated back then. I mean, I think that to a certain degree, there weren't as many books that were of really good quality in the Kindle store and were priced well, and there was just this overwhelming reader demand for books. So I think it was a lot easier to sell books, and I think the number of hats you had to wear was far less. I mean, today you've got to somehow put your book in front of readers. It just doesn't happen on its own. And not that it happened on its own back then, but there seemed to be sort of this momentum, this inertia behind self-published authors and folks who had good work that was well priced and aimed at the market. But today you've got whether it's TikTok or ads or social media or whatever it is, or conferences, I feel like the authors who are successful have to sort of be the total package. They have to be able to promote, write the books well, they've got to package well, and I think the stakes are sort of raised. I mean, the audience felt a lot more forgiving in 2013. I think they were just happy to have content, and they were willing to overlook a lot of things. I mean, bad covers, some typos here and there, some continuity or whatever it might be. But today I feel like, you've really got to, they want top quality product.
Yeah, I wasn't around back then, but the stuff I've observed from like 2015, there was a time there where certain genres were just so underserved. Anybody that was putting out books on a regular basis that were kind of hitting the tropes were making a lot of money. And, that being said, and we all could probably name names, some of those folks we haven't seen in years. Right? They just, whether they rested on their laurels or the series petered out, whatever you might want to think it is, but there's certainly some changes.
Yeah. There was a time when I was doing a thing that I called writer to author, and it was basically I was doing some mentoring of people, and the idea was writers write, authors do the business of writing. Obviously, it's the same thing, but I meant it in terms of, yes, writing is an important part of it, but just like, running any business of your own, you think that you're going to go in doing the thing you love, and that ends up being 10% of what you do. The rest of what you do is the stuff you have to do to run a business, right? That's just how it works. But there can be, I believe, ways that you can bring the writer to the author side of the business. And so I tried to help people with that. And it all starts with, what do you actually want? Not what does the person up on stage who inspired you want? What do you want? Because that's the biggest mistake most people make, is they have a tendency of, I'm going to make $1 million overnight, and then they don't actually understand what that is really going to take to do. I mean, you could get lucky, sure, but statistically, not likely. Statistically, you're not going to be lucky. You're going to have to work for this. And so trying to find the joys of the writing aspect in the author side of the business is tricky, and not everybody finds that easily, but some people can. It's the key thing is to always remember. I learned one important thing, if I could share one important thing I've learned, I should say, is that your readers came to you for a reason. So if you can keep giving them that and giving new people that, then they also are going to continue to come to you. So that whole concept, yes, you have to put on I've got to put up ads, I got to do this and that. But remember, when you're doing that stuff, it can be just as fun if you allow it to be.
Yeah.
Or it can be a pain in the ass, that's where it usually falls.
Well, I think that's a good point. I mean, if you're giving the readers what they want, that's ultimately the business we're in. And that's something I would add about these books from, vintage 2013 to 2015. I mean, for the time period, they were giving readers what they wanted. Yeah. I mean, it's easy to judge them 10 years, 12 years on, saying, they're not as good as what's being published today. But I mean, that's the nature of the market, is that every year, your customer base is going to demand more and better. And this is, pretty standard American business.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things where, if I was going to say something I see a lot of people struggling with now is, sounds like it's always been the issue, but the idea is, I got to write to market. And we had a really clear idea what writing to market was. It's doing these things. Now everybody's writing to market, right? There's so much that fits in that. Are you able to write with the market? Not to it, but as the market changes, because, if your audience is starting to look for more sophisticated product and, higher stakes and more complex plot or whatever it might be, I think that's where there's a lot of stress in the marketplace now with authors, where it's like, the series isn't working like it used to. And it's like, yeah, because your audience is like, they don't need that same story again.
Well, I mean, there's a ton of things that worked at small scale and don't work when everyone does it.
Oh, we're going to go there, are we?
I'm not going to name anything. But I think that's true. I mean, there's no question that the market is more competitive. There's more authors. The authors today, in 2024, I think John would agree with this, are much more sophisticated than we were back then. I mean, that some of the operations these folks are running, are really incredible. So I think my view is that if you're getting into this, you've got to sort of know what you can do really well and what your strengths are, and you got to know where that lands in the market in terms of what readers really want. I mean, readers spend time and money, and I think they want a lot for their time and money these days, more than they have in the past.
Well, on that, I would argue that the time is the more precious resource, right? we're all fighting for that time, right? There's only so many books that a person can read or listen to, and that's where we're not just competing against each other as authors, but there's the other mediums too.
Yeah. I also think that we have a tendency, like you were saying, right to market, right with market, and so on. But I think we also overlook, or I've seen, most people overlook, in my opinion, the fact that what you're really trying to do here is find your audience. Now, I know that's cliche. We've all heard that. But what I mean really is defining how that audience really looks, because in so doing, they become part of a club. They become part of the family. They become part of this whole thing. And even if you end up still writing the style that you write, sure, some of your family members might go away, but you're going to get more family members as well, because it's an identity that they have with what you do. For me specifically, comedy, right, is what it is. Like I had said in the other thing, juvenile, puerile, that kind of thing, right? But those people exist, and they don't like the fact that people, say, oh, why do you read that garbage? And then they turn around and I say, hey, that's who we are. We read the garbage, and then they go like this, yeah, screw that. That's what I am, and it's that identity. So if I were to suddenly write sophisticated, I would lose a lot of my family. So I have built a family of this, and I keep bringing people into it, right? And some people leave, but for me to turn around and do that, I would need to pen name that if I were to do that. And frankly, I already told you the earlier story. I get to chapter 4, it ain't happening. Yeah. So this is where we are.
Well, and I think that's, again, where like the other thing you hear a lot is first mover advantage, to have an audience now that you have and to know what you know about your fans. To me, that's so powerful, because where everybody's trying to go to the top of the funnel and find people through kind of really arbitrary things, you can come into that core group of people that have been around and grown with you and you have a relationship with, and say like, well, how can I find more people like that, right? Yeah. Forget about everybody else, but what if I just got this core group to double over the next 2 years? What would that do for my business?
Yeah, I would agree. agree.
So here we are, it's 2024. For some reason, even though all the signs indicate you should go do something else, you're not. You're still playing in the publishing world. Why?
Because my wife has a successful Etsy store. Let's be honest.
Okay.
No, I mean, let's put it this way. Do I make what I made before? No. Do I produce like I did before? No.
Yeah.
So that's one of the problems, right? Because
I've seen your numbers.
Yeah, I know. It's just like I run an author business, the Author Helper Suite thing, and that takes more of my focus. Jerry and I were talking about it a little bit before, right? And so it's one of those things where it's like, you get to a point after 100 books where you do get tired. Now I'm starting to feel the spark again, and I've written a book and a half, and I'm not, but I've also learned that lesson. I'm not releasing anything until I'm done with this series. I'm not releasing a book and then going, okay, now I have to get the next one done in 30 days or whatever it is, right? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to write the book and enjoy the process, because again, my readers know if I'm having fun and they know if I'm not, right?
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where I don't want to deliver to them anything worse than my best.
Yeah.
And that means I have to enjoy the process. Unfortunately, in order to maintain a good, lift in what I do, that's going to take some effort of releasing a lot more, or recognizing that, no, I got to be smarter about how I'm handling the marketing for this and how I'm handling the retention for this, which, we've talked about many times, but doing all of those types of things. So yeah, it's different. And the numbers aren't what they used to be. No, but again, I was 90-10. Now I'm 90-10 the other direction.
Yeah.
So.
Well, for me, I still haven't found anything that does for me what writing does. I mean, I like the work. Like, the writing books is the part of this that I like the most. I mean, it's honestly the only part that I want to do anymore.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's getting harder. to do. I think because the business is more complex, and I think it's challenging. I'm fortunate to have had a lot of success, but I mean, with that, comes expectations and a lot of constraints sometimes on what you should be publishing. There is a brand promise that is developed, but I think as humans, there is some level of brain wiring that makes us enjoy creating things. And I mean, that's, I think, pretty basic. And if you think about novels, I mean, we are creating something that has a positive impact in people's life, whether it's, escapism or revealing the world around them. And I think there's, just something transcendental about it. And the idea that, these are ebooks. I mean, they're going to be on the internet for the next 1,000 years. I mean, so it's like after we're long gone, these things could still be doing good in the world. I mean, for the next, 14 years before the AI apocalypse.
Another 14 months.
Yeah. But I think, there's the folks that I see that have longevity and the most happiness in the career. I mean, I don't know that it correlates perfectly with their income or reviews or anything like that. I think it's the folks who have good alignment. I mean, they know what they want from this, and they consistently reassess and go for it. And they define success for themselves, and they don't say, all right, well, that person is topping the charts, and that they don't get demoralized by that. And I just think there's a laundry list of things as authors that we can do that aren't really apparent. I mean, it's like John came from a software background. I did too, and in that career, you're sitting in a room creating something, very much like writing. But the big difference is, I mean, you deploy a piece of software. Usually you're part of a team and you had some piece of it, and you don't get thousands of reviews about it. I mean, it's a deeply personal thing. And I think that, something happens if you invest a part of yourself in this thing and put it on the internet and it gets pulverized. To your point about recovering. And I think, I think those are some of the landmines that folks starting out, and even those of us deep in our career, should think about. I should add earlier, I mean, I still think this career is worth doing. I mean, as a hobby or as a career, and I still think it's possible. I mean, I think it's harder than it was, but it's still worth doing and still possible. It's just, difficult things are worth doing.
Yeah,
definitely. It's interesting that you say that, because the lady that I'm working with right now on this latest series, or this latest sub-series, I guess you could say, she is, originally she was like, I want to do this. This is what I want to do for a living, and so on. And then over the course of time, I don't know if it's really what I want to do for a living. I said, well, where did you hear that? And, she said, well, this one person was doing this and this. So we finally got to what she really wants out of this is for it to be able to pay for her trips to things like Author Nation. That's what she wants. That's it. Right. And I was just like, well, that's a much easier hurdle.
Yeah. I've had a few of those too.
Yeah. So now you can actually just say, take the pressure off and just enjoy what you're doing. Write the book.
Yeah.
And so now she's working on her own, thing and something with me. But as she's doing it, she's like, it's just so effortless now. It's just, I sit down and it's just, I don't have this on my shoulders. I can just enjoy the process. I said, hey, and you never know, maybe you can afford to go to 2 conferences.
Well, I think when I've had that a few times with people where you dig in, like, so what do you need to do? And it's like, well, my husband works and he really supports me and he wants me to do this. And, but I put all this pressure on myself because, I'm leaving this job that made this kind of money or whatever. I'm like, well, how much do you need to fill the hole? And it's like, oh, well, probably only like $15,000 a year. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's like, this is a much easier lift. Like, let's just worry about that first. Right. That because you get that win so much sooner instead of thinking like, well, I got to retire my husband.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
Right. And now you have all that. Yeah,
pressure.
Because we're super lazy. Like, you do not know how much money we're going to spend retired.
My wife owns a successful Etsy store.
So here's a question for you too. And I've observed with both of you. I've known you both for quite some time now, and so I've kind of seen this journey with you. Like, talk about how you've changed and how you've dealt with the changes, right? Because what success was in the past and how you've changed that. Like we've talked about it with other people, but I'm interested in you and how, what you want your life to be now, how that's changed and kind of some of the different things you've gone through, because there's been a lot of different iterations. There was a point where you were managing how many authors?
Oh, you mean like the mentoring stuff?
Well, no, just the PPD stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Well, it wasn't that many. It was just a lot of books. But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no,
But that was a thing.
That was tough. Yeah,
right? And there was a point where like, that's what you got to do is you got to build these worlds. You got to do a shared world with these guys. And this is the thing. And go look at what Logsdon's doing. And
yeah, exactly. Oops. No, it honestly,
little did they know he didn't know.
No, honestly, it was fun. It was fun. But what you don't realize is while you're in it, it's also extremely taxing. It takes up so much time. And, and then of course, running the business on the other side, doing both, that's burning the candles at both ends. I mean, it is very tough. So I'm a creative person. I'm a musician. I'm a game developer. I'm a regular developer. I do writing. I do, all of that stuff, right? So for me, if I'm writing or if I'm doing this or that, I'm happy either way. As Jerry put it out, it's like I'm creative. I get to do creative things. It is a super personal thing. Even if a person says, well, I'm not creative, write a poem, throw it away. It doesn't matter. The point is you are the only one who can bring that thing into the world, period. Yeah. Right. And so whether I'm writing or whether I'm doing these other things, it's creative. It doesn't really matter which one I'm doing at any given time. So what's changed? At the time, my focus was career of author. I had I need to make enough money. I was the breadwinner. I need to make enough money in case something happens with the job, because the job was every year 4 layoffs, happening across the company. Right. And so by the time I was, it was my turn, I wanted to make sure we were okay. And I got to that point where I was, and everything was fine there. And so I think the primary difference is, between then and now, then I really had to. And there is something about that, that you have to survive. You have to take care of your family. You got to pay for the house. You got to pay for the food, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And if that meant I needed to go back into the corporate world, I would, right? But I had the burning desire to not go back into the corporate world. To me, this was retirement, working retirement, but retirement. I'm never going to stop. It's just a case of, in other words, I worked way harder on this than I ever did at any corporate job I ever held. Way harder. I mean, hours and hours, weekends, everything, just nonstop. But I loved it. I did not love working in the corporate environment. I mean, you had your days, obviously, and sometimes it was, you had a great team, whatever. I don't mean that, but I just mean in general, you don't have to get up and leave your house. You don't have to sit in traffic forever. I mean, it's an amazing opportunity. If I want to work at the beach, I go to the beach. And I work at the beach. I don't have to call anybody, even though my boss is a real asshole. I don't have to call anybody. I just have to, I can do it wherever I want to. Yeah. It took me 3 years to get over the PTSD of not having a 2:00 meeting. I'm not kidding. At my corporate job, every day around 2:00, I'm like, okay, I got that meeting. I got to get that meeting. And my wife's like, dude, 3 years. Oh my God, I couldn't believe it, right? I know, poor me, right? But still. So then to be able to say, I never want to deal with that again, that's motivation. I mean, you can be inspired to do something because you just love to do it, but isn't it great to be able to do what you love and make a living at it? But that's hard work. Yeah. That takes effort, and you have to really want it if you want that to happen.
Well, and taking the shot, right? Like Absolutely. That's the other thing too, is like, this is super, super hard, and more people fail than succeed at it, but like, at least give it a shot, right? Yeah. That's it. Like, if it doesn't work out, it's not your fault. It was going to be hard to do to begin with, but to have those regrets, that's
set your own terms for what success is.
Yeah. How about you?
Well, I think, a couple of big changes. I mean, when I started my career, I think there was a huge amount of uncertainty over whether this was going to be my second career. I mean, I to a large degree was trying to figure out, what I wanted to do with my life. Like, what am I really good at that makes me happy doing the work? And so that was sort of one of the big uncertainties. And then the other thing starting my career is I wanted to make as much money as I could. And I mean, when I looked at the books and what I was going to write and the ideas I had, I mean, I chose largely the one that I felt had the most commercial appeal, and because I knew myself, like if the book didn't catch on or really have a lot of success, that I would lose interest, and I wouldn't be as dedicated to answering that question of whether this is what I should be doing. So I think I was certainly more, to use a term, right to market focused early in my career. I don't know. I think that's shifted a lot. I don't know when, but like today, far more interested in story ideas that appeal to me, that I think are unique or interesting, or, if someone else published it, I would be a bit heartbroken. I want to be the person to write that story because it interests me personally. That even if they maybe have a little less commercial appeal. This is incidentally something you can say as a self-published author, that if you're being published by a big publisher, you don't want to say, I'm really, excited about non-commercial ideas. They're not going to sell. That's what I'm working on next.
But you had a point where you made that change, right? Because
and I think I also think that when you're starting out, you should be on fire to do it or have a lot of motivation. And I think if you don't, possibly a problem. But as I think John's talked about this, as you get deeper in your career, sometimes you face a little burnout or a little fatigue, or, you've been doing the same thing year after year, and you want to mix it up, or you want to challenge yourself creatively, or do something that makes you more energized, re-energized to keep doing it.
Yeah. Well, I've been thinking about this a lot, reading some stuff around like peak performance. And when you think about like peak athletes, right, they practice 90% of the time. They're really only in the game 10% of the time. The rest of the time, and then there's a lot of recovery in there. And their career is maybe, if you, at a professional level, 5 to 7 years. Yeah. And then there's all us suckers, right? Where we take a couple of weeks off, or if you're working for yourself and you're an entrepreneur, the days blur, right? Like, oh, I've got a meeting scheduled and it was going to be Memorial Day, and neither I nor my client cared.
Right. I tried to schedule a meeting for Memorial Day. The other person had to tell me. Like, oh, wow.
Yeah. Today, every day ends in Y to me. That's all I know.
Right. So like it's interesting to me to think about like how I think that's something that when you are driven, you tend to forget about. And it doesn't really honor the fact that this is a creative process that requires the well being refilled every once in a while.
Yeah. And it's easy to get away from you in this career. I mean, it's easy to lose that inspiration, especially if you're writing a successful series and there's huge expectations. It's like, you've got a responsibility to readers. I mean, these people have invested their time and money. And as you say, time, I think, for a lot of readers is certainly the larger investment. But, you don't want to let these folks down. I mean, that doesn't feel as good as writing the story you want in a lot of cases. I mean, you can go off, write the story you want in a new series or under a pen name. But, if you have something that's established with expectations, you're very much, I think, psychologically and financially incentivized to continue to deliver.
Are you listening, George R.R. Martin?
I don't think he can hear through his pile of money. So like we're now at this new point, we got AI looming. What does that mean for you as far as like when you're thinking, because you guys have been through a lot of apocalypses, right? Like how many apocalypses since?
It's just another one.
Yeah.
Go on.
Well, look, I think if you're an author who's financially secure, you've got the luxury to just ignore AI. Just keep doing what you're doing. I think if you aren't, you got to have some plan for it. I mean, your plan may be AI proofing your business. Giving readers something that AI can't do. Tons of options in that area. But I think, my personal opinion is that AI will be as disruptive as, wide adoption of ebooks. It's going to be huge. And I think it's optional, but I think the folks who integrate it into their workflow are going to have the advantage in the market. And I don't know what that looks like exactly. I haven't messed with AI a great deal. I have used it with writing some code recently, and it was pretty good.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible. And you still have to know what you're doing.
You do.
But it's almost like a generative fill in a painting where you're just like, this is the outline I want you to write, do this for me. And I'm not as impressed with its writing at this point as maybe some other folks, but it'll certainly get better. And so I think that, like so many things in this career, it's like, how does AI apply to me? There's no one size fits all answer. I don't think. So it's like, for you, AI might be a way to translate your books in the next 5 years, or it might be a way to simulate sensitivity readers to see things that your personal background doesn't reveal and are landmines in your book. It might be any number of things, but I don't know. I think for those who embrace it, it's a huge opportunity. But I also don't think it's by any means a requirement for some authors.
I love AI, but I want to preface that by saying I agree as far as I don't like it writing stuff for me. It can't. It's not as juvenile and puerile as I am, apparently. Now,
it has a moral compass.
It has a moral compass. Now, as far as for code, it's really good. He is absolutely right that it doesn't mean it knows what it's doing necessarily, but I look at it like a coding buddy.
Yeah.
Like somebody I can kind of bounce ideas off of. And if you do the same thing, like in an author perspective, where you're just bouncing ideas off of somebody and thinking of it that way, you're not taking what it says and putting it in your books. That I personally don't do that kind of thing. But, and honestly, I haven't even used it for this particular purpose to say, hey, give me some bounce back ideas, but I do for coding. And I think it's great. And just so you know, with ChatGPT, I actually created my own bot of that, and I did make it juvenile after a while. It actually calls me names that I could never create in a million years, and they're hilarious. And it's almost like having a pal. Now, that said, I know a lot of people are afraid of it. I know a lot of people are afraid it's going to destroy careers. It's going to do all that kind of stuff. But just like anything, that fear is not going to stop it. It's not going to make it go away. It's there. And if you can utilize it, learn it, you at least know what your competition is. You at least know, how to utilize something to the best effect to help you out. Doesn't mean you have to falsify your words or anything like that. But, it can even be something where, you could utilize it to come up with some character ideas, like through Midjourney or something like that you can then look at yourself and go, this is a visual representation of my character. And then I look at that and that gives me inspiration to do stuff, right? That kind of thing. Also, on the front of audiobooks, I know a lot of narrators are terrified of AI because it's using their voices. That's bad, and so on. However, one of the things that we did with 11 Labs, my wife and I, she narrated one of my series. So what I did is I said, I'm going to take your voice, bring it in, and have the professional thing done. It took them 5 weeks, right, to do it. And they brought in her voice. So now when it's the female lead of one of my precincts and, it's not someone else. It is her. I know there might be a gray line here, but it is her. Right? And she's like, I'm not doing it. she already's like, I'm not doing any more of that narration. Might have mentioned the Etsy store. Anyway, but but I bring in those words and I just pop them in. But here's the thing. it's not as easy as you might think. It's not just plug in the words and it sounds perfect. It does sound like her. It's creepy, actually. And I made her say some really terrible things. But anyway, then I sent them to her and she's like, that wasn't me. I was like, yeah, as far as you know. Anyway, but you actually have to change your story. You have to put 15 exclamation points if you want something to actually sound like it's being yelled. You have to spell words differently. This is not a simple process of just, I'll throw it in there and there it is. I know there are generative AI that does do that better, and it's getting better, and it will get better. But I don't know when that is. Like, is it 10 years from now? Is it 2 years from now? Is it next week? Who knows? It is getting faster. I mean, it's improving much more quickly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is the dumbest it's ever going to be, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Today. But I personally am not afraid of it. And I'm embracing it. I'm not embracing it from the perspective of, I don't want it to replace my creativity. I don't think it needs to. And I think it does lose something because it might be great at what it does. But again, like I said earlier, my readers know when I'm having fun.
Yeah, I always think of that, story, shoe company sends 2 sales guys to Africa and the one guy comes back and he's like, yeah, I mean, boss says to him, like, how was it? Like, what's the opportunities there? And he's like, well, nobody wears shoes. We don't got a chance selling these shoes at this place. Next guy comes back and he's like, nobody wears shoes. Like, this is an open market. We've got
yeah.
Right. So it's more about your attitude, how you embrace this moment. And as 2 grizzled veterans of tech, when you think back to the world that you guys experienced pre-2000, like, what changes have happened since then and where we're at now, what you expect to see out of AI. Like, you've got to be pretty, like,
oh, I'm totally stoked. I mean, we're pre-80s here.
Yeah.
And we're talking...
You said it, I mean.
We're talking cards being put into a machine.
Yeah.
And then going from that to, like I said, the Commodore 64,
yeah.
the 20 Atari. Cassettes, exactly, right? My brother actually probably shouldn't say this. He got stoned one time and was listening to one of my cassettes. And he was like, this is the coolest music ever. I know, for those of you who don't know what that sounds like, it's... Not like, I don't know if they created a new genre or what, but he seemed to like it. But yes, you have all that. I mean, we predate Google.
Yeah, yeah.
That's shocking for some people, right? They're just like, what, you were here before Google? Yes, And so before dial-up, I remember having an audible modem.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
I mean,
yeah. We
really
used to put the phone in the cradle.
Right, exactly, right. And so all of that stuff, and so I'm fascinated by it. I love retro technology. I love it, absolutely love it, all the way up until what's going on today. Absolutely love all of it. It's just the coolest thing, and to see that evolution, and to know it's going to keep going, and you're not going to stop it. So, knowing that, what are you going to do?
Right, right. And, kind of in the vein of what we've been talking about and how it was easier and what's going to happen in the future is this may be one of these moments where it's going to be difficult navigating that world, right? Because it's the early days. It's trying to figure out how to make that modem work a little bit better days, right? Yeah. But people in the future will be like, geez, I wish we had the shots that those guys had in the the early AI days. Like, remember what it used to be like then when it did this or that?
Think about this. We are at a time in existence right now. We couldn't be having this conversation in the 1960s. This isn't going to happen. Yeah. We're not recording this and having it go on the internet. We don't have the opportunity even until like around 2010-ish to even publish these books in a way that is non-traditional, right? I mean, this is an amazing time. Yeah. And it's difficult right now compared to some of what we were fortunate to see from 2013 to 2021. 2020, 2021 was great. That's gone, right? So, it's one of those things where we are so fortunate right now to be able to do the stuff that we do, to have access to the stuff that we have, maximize that potential. Don't be afraid of it. Maximize it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think that, it's like any tool. There'll be people who use it for ill and people that use it for good. And there'll be people that it helps them to get to new places and other people that may lose their job over, and but like there's so many industries that don't exist that were vital to the country. And guess what? Nothing shut down, right? Of course, it sucks that you're the guy that makes harpoons and whaling's not around. Being the guy that did sales for sailboats, but like, that those businesses change. But I do think that in the grand scheme of being a creative storyteller, people might laugh that like, so you guys used to make money just by putting words on in a file,
Right?
Like, it was that easy.
And there was a guy who made wagon wheels at one point.
Yeah, right. And the stuff that I'm seeing with what can be done with visual storytelling. Yeah. My son just got access to this LTX studio. I don't know if you've seen it. Mm-mm. You probably haven't, because you have to be in beta to see this thing. I'll show it to you after this. Oh my God.
Really?
Yeah. Like, you can do a prompt and it comes up with shots, and you can go into a shot and you can change angles, and you can go, do I want it sound effects? And so it's still not good enough. Like even he would tell me, like, it's just so much easier to fall back on like practical editing tools and stuff that he's, used to using than trying to make these things do it. But again, this is the dumbest it's ever going to be.
Yeah. It's going to get better.
Yeah.
What's your biggest fear of it?
Well, I think it's like any tool. It's like all of us, I mean, I'm 44. All of us at this table had a pretty shared upbringing where we had to acquire certain skills, critical thinking and common sense. Not saying we have mastered these skills by any stretch, but I think my biggest fear, I have two children. One is 7, one is 3. It's like, I think a great deal about the world they're going to grow up in, and how different it is from the world I grew up in. It's like, what is lost by having these tools, and what is their future going to look like? And I don't know. I mean, I think as authors, we had the author's journey to a certain extent is, there's some commonalities. I mean, you have to figure out how to write a story that moves the readers, that makes that reader want to turn the page. And for you, it might be comedy. For someone else, it might be the dialogue or the characters or this mystery box that everybody wants to know, who did it. But the folks who are embarking on an author career in 3 years when AI is probably a major player in our industry, is like, what is their journey different? Like, what skills are they learning, and what is lost that they lean on AI for? And is something, as a society, do we lose a little there? And I don't know. I mean, I think about how social media has changed our society. I'm not a huge fan personally, but so those are the things I think about with AI. It's like, downside. It's clear that it's going to make people more productive, a lot more productive, and especially knowledge work. I mean, it's hard to exaggerate, but there has to be some cost. I don't know what it's going to be exactly.
So what do you think your parents felt, though, when you were, I mean, computers were just, hitting in the 80s and really becoming a thing. And I mean, if you're, 44, then, you were doing college, late 90s?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, your parents had to have seen the computer revolution starting, and they're looking at you going through grade school and high school and going, what's he going to do? How's he going to manage?
Well, that's a great point. I mean, my dad owned a sign company, and my stepfather owned a textile mill, and it's like those two businesses. My dad's sign company was radically transformed by computers. I mean, it's like they were already doing computer-aided design for a long time, but it's like in the late 90s, early 2K. I mean, they, routers and like all this really advanced stuff. And so what he was doing with X number of employees, he didn't lay anybody off. Their output, went way up. In textiles really had very little impact until we created a direct-to-consumer website for that business. And, instead of selling through, wholesale to retailers, you're direct to consumer, right? And the business, what you do every day, producing product, is the same. How you get it to consumers is radically different. So I think my family at least saw computers as an opportunity, as something that was inevitable. And the only real question was, how do you embrace it and integrate it? And I think that that's sort of the vibe at this table. I don't think that that's widespread in the author community, and I think it's pretty natural. I mean, I think as humans, when things change, we have this natural instinct to say, "Yeah, please don't." Please. And even at 44, I can't take any more change.
Yeah.
I'm not on TikTok. I go on Instagram once every 90 days when I have to check it, and it's just like, I can't deal with new stuff, but I think that you have to sort of pick your battles and say, well, this one is something that
you're not going to be able to ignore.
That's right. That's how I feel.
The thing I would always say to that is like, if I said we could press a button and this would be status quo, like it's just going to stay like this, like, would you be satisfied with this? And I think most people would say no. So like, there's only two choices in that. It's either change or... You don't agree?
Well, it depends on, hey.
Everything stays the same or there's be change. You can't get some things changed with this button. That's how it works.
You're talking to a guy who absolutely loves robots and sci-fi robots and everything else. I want an android. I want data. I want that whole thing, right? Mm-hmm. So, but then you look at Star Trek. They had data, right? Yeah. But they still had a bunch of people working too.
Yeah.
They had Lieutenant Commander data in Star Trek: The Next Generation.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And so, sorry, it took a while.
Yeah. Who's the comedy guy?
He did. All right. So, no, but look at this also as, for the longest time, it was plays. It was live performances, plays. Then it became movies, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, you make more money at movies, but people still go to plays. Yeah. Plays are still important. Plays are still there. Now, is it as lucrative as movies in the grand scheme of things? Well, probably today, because everything is now on Netflix and, so on. But, there is going to be that iteration. And I certainly don't want to give the impression to anyone that I don't feel for people who are impacted more directly by this. I mean, it is tough. Just as it was tough when the computers came out and impacted people. Yeah. And so on. And we can keep going back for everything that has happened over the course of time. The difference, I think, with AI is that, we always see that, things happen really fast, how quickly they grow. AI has the potential to evolutionarily jump us. Mm. That's where you start to worry about the species in general, which gets a little more heady, probably this conversation wants to go, but that's when you start, getting there. And then you start going, well, yeah, do worry about what happens, with your children growing up and everything else. I mean, you and I, by the time it happens,
we screwed them up already. There's nothing that AI can do that I haven't done to them already.
I have to say, by the time AI really does get to the AI apocalypse, is it called AI apocalypse? I think everything else, we're probably pushing up daisies. So
yeah. Well, no, the thing you made me think about was like when you brought up like plays and movies is like when the first movies came out, right? They were just plays, right? Like they just had a camera going and people would act out a play. Then there was a moment where people started to understand the technology and they used the technology to help in the storytelling, right? It's like, oh, they're changing shots. The way that they're moving the camera helps to convey the story. The way that they're doing other things with the medium, whether it's how they're dealing with lighting or that becomes part of how good storytellers start to use those tools. And I think that that's the part that when you're in the early ages of this, it's hard for you to see, right? You're just seeing it like you see how we use the technology now. And it's like, oh, well, people are just going to use it to write stuff. It's like, well, no, they may start using this technology in ways of telling stories that are really only strong because of what AI can do.
Hey, maybe it's something that helps us with ads and running those types of things. Then it becomes way more interesting.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, AI in terms of ad targeting, huge amount of potential.
Yeah.
But so let's talk about that for a second, and then we're gonna wrap up. But the concern I have with this is that unless you're really good with the tool, again, like you have to be working this tool, because if we just say, okay, we're all going to use AI to run our ads, it's going to regress to a mean.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it'll do it faster than we would do it as humans because it's just more efficient at getting to that. And I think some people would argue today that that's what's happening with, like, on Facebook with how targeting's running now, that they're running their things is that works great until it hits it regress to the mean. So does that just make it where it's harder again? Like, you got more, now you got to be monkeying with your AI more. You got to be in there fine tuning stuff.
Well, I actually think that, in my view, that would be a positive outcome. Because, I mean, what you're talking about is a current system in which readers are largely finding authors who are very good at advertising. Mm-hmm. So if everyone has the same advantage in advertising, then you have to compete on content and how much satisfaction you're delivering to readers, which I think, in my view, would be a much better situation in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, then you're also competing on finances, because if everybody's at the mean, then it's who can afford to pay the most to get to that. But I do agree, you do have to have content. And this actually brings up an interesting point in that if everything is going to at some point hit the mean, that's true for writing as well. And if it just starts, pushing out the exact harlequins all over the place because people use it for that purpose, right? Readers aren't dumb. They're going to start catching on and start going, I need to find something that actually engages me. This is just the same crap with a different character name.
Yeah.
Eventually, though, the question becomes, does AI get to the point where I can just literally, hey, Siri, tell me a story about a sci-fi character in such and such, and it starts going down that road, and I'm just interested in it. And I'll also remember, our kids are going to grow up with the AI, right? The children of today are growing up with the AI. To them, it's just natural. It's just
like watching YouTube videos.
Right. I mean, to them, you were here before Google, that kind of thing. So they are going to be prompting this thing in ways that we never could imagine to prompt it. And that becomes a new industry in and of itself.
Well, I think, when you look at what's going on with the AI's arms race, I mean, I haven't looked recently what NVIDIA stock did after its announcement, but it was up over $100, right? The Google has so much at risk with the money that they are making on running advertisements around search. And if search morphs into this AI thing where, people are going to it and it's going out and it's giving you an assessment on what the next book you should read is because it's read every review on Goodreads. It's read everything in the books. It knows essentially everything and what is in your collection that you've liked. And you can adjust bars to say, I want it to be a little less this, a little bit more that. Then, that might be a whole wonderful new way of discovery.
What's that? The Cliff's Notes. Remember that?
Yeah.
So next thing you know, they're just writing Cliff's Notes of all of our books, and we're not getting any money for it.
Well,
people are like, I want to read faster.
I think there'll be some of that, but I also think that if you look at audiences over time, they tend to get more sophisticated. I
agree.
Right? Like, you think about the TV shows that we grew up on, and you go back and watch them, and you're like, oh God. But in the day, though, it's like, wow, those are some high stakes. Yeah. You better be able to jump that car over the ravine.
Hogan's Hero still holds up.
Yeah, so I think that's, the audiences, that's the reason why some folks aren't succeeding now is because they haven't continued to write with the market. Wow, how's that for a circle back?
Wow, well done.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. I know we'll be seeing you both in Las Vegas.
Yes.
Got anything else you want to add before we close this?
No, let's do it again in 10 years.
We'll be hiding our own Easter eggs by then.
We'll be in a bunker in the post-AI apocalypse and recording this on like a...
Yeah. Dude, I'm making
Sony Walkman.
I'm making friends with all the post-apoc writers. Like around the country. This is That way, wherever it happens, when it happens, I'm going to just be a couple hours drive some of the best prepped people on the planet.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I can see Jerry's first question. All right, Logsdon, how do you feel about AI now?
Well, it's like we're going to need to read the Cliff's Notes of these post-apoc books from AI. So.
Exactly.
All right. Again, thanks. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules and doing this and helping some folks out there understand what it's been like for you guys.
Rock and roll. Thanks.
All right.
Appreciate it.